Might I start by saying I'm absolutely delighted to be back in Boston. It's a city I enjoy very much, and I really do like the sense of the focus around that transformational nature of education here. It really does come through very well. I'd like to thank the British Council for setting up this higher education series to encourage us to have conversations and to be provocative. And I think this focus on the value of entrepreneurship in higher education is timely. It is a lively conversation across the sector, I know, in the UK and also here. So I'm interested in some of that engagement. So I've been tasked by our organisers to think about entrepreneurship versus internationalisation and whether universities can actually prioritise both. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about Plymouth, a little bit about some of the forces applying across the European HE sector, but also then come back and talk to you a little bit about our enterprise mission and answer that question. I'll probably answer that question right before the end, so if you want to nip out, you can do so. For those of you who don't know Plymouth, this is Plymouth in the UK. Last time when I was over at Harvard, I had a little sign saying Plymouth, and the chap in front of me said, "Hey, you're local." No. So this is Plymouth. It is a beautiful city in the southwest of England. Just around the corner, over on that left-hand side, is where the Mayflower sailed from, 1620. So we've got a big anniversary, 400 years coming up in about 8 years' time. This white box on the front there is where our students graduate. So they have, I think, an iconic view of Plymouth Sound. And it's where last year we held the America's Cup. So the America's Cup, it was the Formula One racing on the water. And it was the first place the sailors said that they'd ever been where they could hear the roar of the crowd on the boats. So that is a natural amphitheatre. The city defines itself as the city of discovery. And that's what you see as you kind of enter across into the Devon borders and into Plymouth. I mentioned the Pilgrim Fathers and the connection that we have and hold very deeply with America. And I think what we find as a city is that our heritage is very much defined by place, but defined also by the sea. It is a real sense that that is rooting us, but it's also encouraging us now, I think, to explore new horizons. It's a fairly smallish city, 19th city in the UK in terms of size, but it is positioned in some of the most beautiful English countrysides that there is. I mean, the moors and national parks. It is a very special place. But it's a city very much that is transitioning from what it was around a naval dockyard and a kind of blue-collar space into a city that is emerging very much as a leading knowledge economy, and it's placing the university at the heart of that transition. So they're beginning to talk about the city as a city which is a university city. So I can really see some parallels with what's going on here in Boston. So it's a great place to have this conference and to do some of that discussion. So very much a city in transition, finding now its next horizon, really, exploring its next horizon. The university, we started out as a school of navigation back in 1862, serving the needs of our community and society. And so we've been delivering higher education in the city of Plymouth for 150 years. So this year was our 150th anniversary, and we've spent the whole year celebrating, both looking back, but most importantly looking forward and setting out our stall for the next 150 years or so. We position ourselves now as a top UK modern university in the top 100 universities labelled that are under 50 years since their charter. The university emerged as in the top 20 in the UK and actually at number 10 in the UK alongside Warwick and York. So it's, I think, a very ambitious institution, large institution, and now a multi-national global institution in terms of we now have on our campus and overseas students from over 100 nations, so a really diverse large, exciting university, multi-faculty, so everything from the arts to our own medical school and everything in between, engineering, maths and so on, so a very large institution. And our focus very much has been on innovation and enterprise, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that, but we very much accord with that definition of an anchor institution, a place-making institution, and we see that across the UK in terms of some of the universities actually represented in this room from the UK, like Liverpool and so on, actually really helping cities transition, really anchoring and placemaking for their cities. One of the highlights of our university year was being awarded the Queen's Anniversary Prize for Higher and Further Education in the UK. This is one of only 15 awards put out every 2 years, and it's in the Queen's Diamond Jubilee year, so a very prestigious year. And that was awarded to us for the quality of our marine and maritime research and education. So very special to get that kind of sense of recognition about the quality of the marine and maritime research and teaching, but it is the highest national honour that can actually be bestowed on a university. So it's kind of positioning Plymouth as an interesting university moving forward, and it really, I think, helps us now connect very deeply internationally around those axes. So back to the question, in terms of entrepreneurship versus internationalisation, can we prioritise both? I think we've seen internationalisation being quite a buzzword across the sector. We've heard about entrepreneurship as a kind of wave. I think the question I will answer now, and it really is that I don't think you can say either or. This is, for us, very much a both-and agenda. That's what it's about. I think in order to deliver of solutions to the grand challenges of our day, in order to deliver global citizens through our graduates, we have to embrace these forces around entrepreneurship and internationalisation. So I think the answer, if you needed one, is, and maybe contentious, we'll talk about it later, is that it's very much a focus on both. And that's how we positioned our enterprise mission, which I'll talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing at Plymouth, is around entrepreneurship, is around internationalisation, because we see it as our social responsibility to both address those grand challenges and deliver global citizens through our graduates. In terms of some of the global forces, and then I'll take you down into what's happening in the UK, the kinds of things that are kind of encouraging, I think, university to look really seriously in these spaces are the ways in which I think the old world order is just changing dramatically. And we're kind of moving into some new world order that really has yet to be established. We're kind of finding our way as we see institutions around us change and sometimes collapse, or really be impacted in a way that's making them wobble at the very foundations. We're seeing it in the UK around the BBC or around our MPs or whatever, but there's a whole range of things where that whole world, that old world order is just changing beyond recognition. So massive recessionary pressures in many economies, a real sense that the whole market for higher education offer is changing dramatically. We're seeing China set out in its plan that they want to be a delivery country, you know, to actually focus and be a global delivery, when our understanding has often been that we, US, Australia, UK, are actually educating graduates from China. They're coming to us, but they're seeing themselves as a hub now. We're seeing India with a population 40% under 18 years of age. I think there's somewhere in the region of 26,000 higher education institutions. So there's this massive change around the whole higher education market, massive change around those population dynamics. And we're seeing the impact of technology very powerfully from kind of higher education as a content deliverer into higher education to enable learning and enable education to happen, because content's out there, and how do we assemble content? How do we help the learner make a journey through that? And so we're training and we're educating folk for jobs that don't exist yet, to establish new positions, new jobs, new companies, and drive growth. And I think we've got a really interesting kind of context in which higher education is operating now. There's a real sense of our time to help the world move forward around some of those spaces is absolutely critical. And I think there's a broadening understanding about the importance of higher education to help nations transform themselves and to help society realise its goals. So there's a real recognition around the importance of helping talent express itself in society, that sense of social inclusion, and also the sense that higher education can drive economic growth. And I think that's something that brings together both entrepreneurship and internationalisation, not least because as a globe, as a world, we are hyper-connected and absolutely interdependent. Something happens in one country, we feel it in another. So there's a real sense of connection. I think in terms of how we in the UK are interpreting some of these global changes, we really have, and this is not because I'm here and it's not to flatter the Americans among us, but we really have taken a lead from some of the work that the US universities have done. You've been ahead of the curve, genuinely, in these spaces. I think you have a lot in which the UK can learn from, and I think that's why this conference is very timely. It's a really great opportunity to bring together some new relationships and strengthen partnerships that already exist. But you have, I think, been trailblazers in actually identifying the transformational nature of entrepreneurship in particular as a force for good. So you have this sense of student activity, a sense that people will invest and endow funding to help drive the student experience. And I think we really have seen the UK take a lead from some of the excellent work that's going on here. And I think actually, self-critically, I would say that the UK has been behind the curve a little bit on the embracing entrepreneurial activity. We're seeing it now. We're seeing us catch up, and we're seeing us do some incredibly interesting projects and ideas that I think we can bring to the table in the US and indeed elsewhere. But I think there are some really good ideas that we can learn from. And a couple, I've made it my business to explore, really, is spent some time at Arizona State. And those of you who know President Michael Crow there, talking about that new modern university, the new American university. And I think what's very interesting about the way, and it's very similar to what Plymouth has done, is that Arizona State have embraced not a project around entrepreneurialism or around internationalization, but they've taken a whole institution lens to what they do, and that's exactly what Plymouth has done as well. So really interesting ideas around both the way that they're connecting their student experience, the way they're helping entrepreneurs emerge, and also the way that they're connecting their innovation spaces and their knowledge transfer spaces. So the Arizona State, I think, has been a real inspiration, as I say, the sense that they have taken this whole institution approach. So lots of really interesting examples there. Northeastern, we're going to hear from the president later on. Northeastern has, I think, taken this real sense of entrepreneur at the heart of. So they've got a number of really interesting examples, but particularly around that social enterprise space. And again, some resonance with Plymouth and our leadership nationally of the social enterprise activity. Len, we all know, I think, follow what's happening at Babson College, and I was really interested to hear that he's going, which we saw in the news this time, but I think there's been a real sense of focus around what Babson have been doing, and there's some fantastic examples there. And Kaufman too, we all know of Kaufman. We as Plymouth University have worked with them both on our Institute for Enterprise down in one of the poorest counties in the UK, Cornwall, but they've also helped, I think, around some of our work on looking at how universities help cities and regions transform themselves. And I think we would love to see the Kaufman campus, first in the UK, coming down to southwest England and Plymouth. So if anyone knows anyone, do let us know. But I think some of the work that's going on there. So I think if you look around, I had 3 or 4 more slides on what's going on in the US, and you'll know, and I hopefully will bring some of those examples out as we go through the day. But lots to learn, and I think the UK now catching up, but also I think now can bring something to the table around partnerships. So what is it that's going on in the UK about these 2 axes? Why are we seeing, I think, institutions look around and think about entrepreneurial activity, think about enterprise, think about internationalization so differently now? Why? I think one of the reasons is that there's been a huge change to the way that UK higher education has been funded. And so it's moving away from a kind of block grant activity into an environment where it is much more marketized, that the individual student has to make a decision and contribute significant funds to that. And so I think that's changing the whole dynamic in a very positive way, in the sense of kind of a move away from a grant-funded dependency culture into a much more entrepreneurial culture within the UK. So really focusing on where you have excellence to deliver into a crowded market space and having a point of difference and having a real sense that someone is going to purchase an experience and expect a return on that investment. So a huge disruption happening at pace across the sector. Move around the student as customer. At Plymouth, we don't recognise that kind of whole marketised piece around a customer is not purchasing a thing in terms of a degree. They are actually having to engage in their experience. So we've kind of positioned that around students as partners. I'm very happy to pick up on that later. So we've got this massive change around student choice and the government driving marketisation and trying to create a much more dynamic, entrepreneurial higher education sector across the UK, and it's been done at pace. So there's been a lot of agility required by some institutions, and other institutions that have been slower off the mark are losing ground. Student expectations changing dramatically, and I think what we've had across the last, I guess, 10 years or so is a call for universities much more to engage with businesses and the communities that they serve. So we've had the Lambert Review back in 2003, and most recently this year, my previous boss, Sir Tim Wilson, putting out the Wilson Review, again calling for a greater engagement between universities and businesses in particular. So a lot of that is distilling down for institutions to look in and say, where do we genuinely have excellence, and to look out and look at where the market demands are, and actually really think about how they themselves as institutions need to be more entrepreneurial, and also how they need to deliver of more entrepreneurial graduates because of the disruption that's happening on that global stage that we talked about earlier. We did a piece of work, very complicated blobs on this diagram, but I'll talk you through it a little bit. We did a piece of work for the Higher Education Funding Council for England to try and understand the dynamics of what was happening in the UK, within the UK higher education market. And we focused on England, and we looked at how institutions were positioning themselves as evidenced through their mission statements in what is a crowded market. So there's a piece of research that talks about blue ocean, red ocean thinking. The red middle is that kind of crowded higher education institutions, all pretty samey, all dependent on a kind of block-funded grant from the state. And then there's a sense that institutions are emerging around axes of excellence and positioning out into a slightly calmer, bluer water in terms of different axes in which they're looking at their strengths, they're looking at market needs, and they're trying to elaborate a real sense of a point of difference. So from that crowded space, we have seen a significant shift, and this is the early piece of work, we've done a later piece of work to follow up, a significant shift of universities focusing in and around that entrepreneurial enterprise direction, serving the professions, serving society, with a very rich research vein that underpins that. So there's been a huge shift out into that, what was a new market space for a lot of the UK universities. And I think a lot of that, Plymouth, genuinely, we have led some of that movement. We're also seeing institutions become much more boutique and specialist as well, and again, focusing where they have genuine excellence. And then there's still probably a few, probably 4 or 5, who can genuinely lay claim to being world-class research institutions. So it's quite a narrow vein, but it is materially important on the global scale. So that piece of work around distinctiveness and the way in which there is genuine movement within the UK sector, you're seeing it around the entrepreneurial axis, you're seeing it around that internationalization axis. And so our piece of work was looking at leadership, governance and management across what we termed enterprising higher education institutions. And that we follow that up now as a longer term study with the Hefke study to show that that is just getting even more obvious, that sense of movement, that sense of points of difference. And I think that's a really interesting space where you see this kind of sense of disruption and those global influences focusing institutions around their strategic axes and making some really important choices and having the agility then to deliver on them. Because it's easy to say something, particularly at president level, easy to say. It's getting the guys to get on and do it. And then we'll talk a little bit about those leadership challenges in a moment. So from that Europe, what's happening into the UK, and now let's have a little look about what we're doing at Plymouth. We set out our stall to be the enterprise university. That was our challenge, and as I've said in other fora, only an academic will understand how we would have had discussions around whether we would have been an enterprise university or the enterprise university. So, you know, you have lots of debates about that important word, and we just sort of threw down the gauntlet and said we'll be the enterprise university. And what does that mean? It meant that we, similar to ASU, took a whole institution approach. It was very much that we saw one of the weaknesses of the institution was it was insufficiently connected globally. So we did not and had not developed fully our internationalization space. We were not producing those global citizens that I think we need. And we also had a lack of entrepreneurial focus and activity, although there were lots of pockets of people getting on with things, but it hadn't been strategically aligned. So we really took that sense of that enterprise space to ourselves. It very much built on the horizons of the institution in terms of our history. We started off serving society. We started off delivering off skilled individuals to meet those societal needs. There was a real sense that it was true to who we were. There was a real sense it was grounded in our heritage, and therefore it felt real, it felt authentic, and it felt that we could deliver and leverage on that heritage to build out new horizons. We genuinely understood, and I think increasingly are understanding, the focus on the student experience and how this genuinely enriches the delivery to the students. And it is giving us a genuine market optimistic market position, really. We're outperforming our competitor sets, I think, on lots of different areas, and I'll talk you through some of those. It also created research opportunities. There was a movement in the UK around business-facing universities, and I was part of that, but it always felt that it wasn't facing the academy and it wasn't facing research. And so I think the enterprise mission firmly held on to the fact that we are an academic institution and research is at the heart of what we do. And so there's a real sense that this agenda gave opportunities around those spaces. We also had a lot of discussion around, are we simply doing things for commercial gain? This entrepreneurial activity is often focused around startups and starting up businesses, and cash is king, and there's a whole kind of sense of that kind of Wall Street kind of, you know, mentality, and it didn't have a sense of entrepreneurial activity for social good, for social gain, for what we call social enterprise. And so we took that very much to heart and worked alongside the government and are now the national lead university for social enterprise, which really is tapping into some of the internal and intrinsic motivators for our students. They recognise they want to do something that changes the world, but they're not profit-driven. in a sense. They see that there's a sense of a different kind of focus there, so that's been really important to us. And it's also allowed us to confidently engage internationally, to come to the international marketplace relatively late as an institution, but with a real sense of a point of difference and a real sense of engagement. So our global partnerships now are building around those axes, around entrepreneurship and around that internationalization. So it's really given us, I think, a sense of focus. That's been our mission. Enterprise we took as both a mindset, and we've spent more time on the mindset and the cultural piece. We did draw quite a lot of inspiration from this paper, which was called Reconceptualizing the Academy. And what was really interesting about this paper, and it was a kind of UK-centric focus, is that in the UK we talk about teaching institutions, research institutions, and if you do anything else, it's put in this box, which we actually label in return. It's called other. So it's giving you a value message straight away. And this paper actually started to tackle that third way, or the third stream, or the stuff in the other box. And it said, actually, being entrepreneurial or engaging internationally is not other. It's central to your teaching. It's central to your learning. It's central to your research and your innovation. And it repositioned that third mission as being part and parcel of mission 1, teaching, and mission 2, research. And it's a very powerful space for us, because a lot of the discussion in the UK up until that point was, okay, if you're doing entrepreneurial activity or if you're doing international stuff, that's other. That's in the box called other. It's not about mainstream core teaching and learning. It's not about mainstream research innovation. And this paper actually shows you evidentially, which was important for an academic audience that likes to argue, trained to argue for a living, that's our job. It showed us as an institution that it could be alongside and embedded within our teaching and learning space, embedded within our research space. And it really showed you how both of those core pillars of an institution materially move forward and are accelerated by having a sense of focus on internationalization and entrepreneurship. And so taking a whole institution view. So very much an interesting paper, and one that was important as part of our journey. It was in 2008, it's when we started this journey, and it was important. So what I'd like to do is just walk through, just briefly, and then give some time for questions, the kinds of benefits we have seen at an institutional level across these axes of internationalizing and the entrepreneurial, what we call the enterprise mission. So I'll pick up strategic, then our staff, and then our student base. But strategically, we have genuinely seen material reputational gain around the institution. We have seen the way that it's drawn us to examine closely our student experience and don't think about okay, they're business school students, therefore they have a little module called enterprise or entrepreneurial activity. How do we embed it in the curricula for nursing? How do we embed it in the curriculum for everything else? How do we create extracurricular activities? How do we just make it normal to actually think about taking your ideas and giving them life? And that's really been strategically really important. It's created vastly new opportunities, more opportunities than frankly we can handle. And so we say no to partnership opportunities more than we say yes, but those new opportunities are coming because people see a vibrancy and a sense of activity and a sense of really delivering something special. It's really helped us to focus around our community and our corporate social responsibility and connect very deeply to our local community, but also think about our local community now on a global level in the way that we're working in Sri Lanka and elsewhere. It's helped us reposition our brand, and I noticed that we've got in the programme our old, what I call the blob, which I killed, and we now have an interesting brand proposition where there is no logo to hide behind, and we're just called with Plymouth University, and actually it's very much enterprise with Plymouth University, so we should have a nice new logo to stick over your brochure so you can be completely contemporary and up to date with where we are. But also, strategically, it has helped us with our resilience and with our sense of surplus and our financial sustainability across the whole piece. So strategically, this has been absolutely the right axis for Plymouth University, building on our heritage and actually creating a point of difference and a sense of success around that institution. And I think it's been very, very powerful. The most powerful piece for me is really about the next two slides with our people and our students. And I think what's really come through is the way that people who work in institutions, and particularly universities, they are brimming with ideas that somehow the forms, the systems, the committees, and all the other things just beat out the will to live sometimes. And you just think, what's the point? By the time it's gone up through X committees and down through Y committees, there's no point. The moment will have gone. And it's really encouraged us to say to staff, go with it. Do it, yes, you know, we have risk and accountability and all sorts of other frameworks, but it's capturing the ideas from folks. So we've had everything from our cleaning staff say, why aren't we using bagless kind of hoovers, because we are the #1 green university in the UK, all the way through to people setting up cultural cafes to help our international students. It's across the board. It's been able that you can bring in the things that you care about, that motivate you, into your organisation and uplift them into your organisation. And that actually brings that discretionary effort that you can choose to uplift into an organisation, somewhere in the region of 15 or 20%. You can either choose if you're feeling engaged and empowered, or you can take it home with you. My people are uplifting that into the organisation. So to be, you know, cynical about it, there's a 15% extra effort for the same price, you could say, or there is a sense of deeply engaged folk who care deeply about their contribution. It's really been an empowering space. We actually set up a whole cohort of people called enterprise enablers across the institution, because often you get an idea, you come to a conference, you feel empowered, you go back and your manager hates it and just stamps on you. And so we said we've got to create an opportunity where people at any level can actually uplift their ideas into the organisation. And we've really found that sense of engagement. Over some of the challenges that we've had to work together, there is a real sense of pride in what the organisation's doing and a real sense that they can make a difference. You can make a difference, whatever level you're operating at. Similarly for our students, this is what some of our academics said in terms of being entrepreneurial. And I think sometimes people don't feel that academics are entrepreneurial. They don't think that professional staff in universities are entrepreneurial, but they are. You know, they really are amazing. In terms of our students, we have, over this last transition in the UK, there's been a national decline around places and people joining university. I think the sense of fear is around 10–12% nationally down in terms of the number of people going on to university. And I think at Plymouth we haven't experienced any of that decline at all. The demand for places is higher. The sense of student satisfaction is higher. Our student satisfaction is the greatest improvement across the sector in the last national student survey, way outperforming our benchmarks, so showing that sense of deep engagement. I think if you look at the outcomes around employability, 92% of our students go on directly into graduate employment. That's a phenomenal achievement when you look at the recessionary pressures and what's happening in the southwest, which is not London. So incredible kind of stats around that. What we've seen is, again, a both-and approach. Is we have had to embed activity around global citizenship, internationalization, entrepreneurial activity, entrepreneurial traits, and so on into the curriculum. We've just had to do that. It's had to be, it's part of your journey. It's not something you opt into or opt out of, because we're not just talking about startups and being an entrepreneur, we're talking about being a member of a workforce and being entrepreneurial in what you're doing and taking those risks. But we've also offered a whole range of extracurricular activities and student societies and competitions and business plan competitions and so on. Volunteering has been a phenomenal way of bringing those things together. So we have and deliver 13,000 hours of volunteering into our local community through our student body. And again, a great way to develop citizenship, a great way to develop your leadership skills, your entrepreneurial problem solving and so on, and really have something to say. I mentioned that students as consumers, we just react at a kind of visceral level around that consumerism piece, that you simply purchase a degree. It's very much that you have to add something to your experience. You have to add your own talent, your ideas, your own struggles to your journey as a student. And so we articulated a very powerful construct around students as partners and seeing them partner genuinely with the institution. Again, that's been really important. So we've seen our students win 3 times out of 5 the national business plan competition Flux. We've seen us take Flux as a competition over to a number of other countries, which I'll talk to you a little bit about. We've seen our students held up as just incredible ambassadors around this space, and their energy is quite infectious. Smeaton's Tower on Plymouth Hoe, but students talking about the fact that they just didn't come in thinking they're going to be the next Branson or they're going to be the next Anita Roddick or whatever. There was a real sense that these students have just been inspired by the culture, by the mindset of the organisation, just making it absolutely embedded as part of what we're about. Now, clearly that whole journey from 2008 to now has been an absolute breeze. There's been no issues at all. So that's fine, I could finish there. Or I could be completely honest and talk a little bit more about the leadership challenges. There were loads, and there still are loads. There was a real sense of, what do we mean by the enterprise mission? If I got asked that once, I got asked it a million times. And my response was, what do you think it means? And that was kind of annoying for people because I'm, the president of the university and I know all the answers, and therefore I should be telling them exactly what the script is and how to think. That's not how it works. And so they had to actually start challenging and arguing and trying to find out what it was about, and that was really hard. But we're still there, although we've just published our new strategy for 2020, Mayflower 2020. We've just published that. We launched that yesterday. And again, we've had to define what we mean by enterprise. Communicating it at every level. I mean, absolute roadshow, no good just doing the odd little promo, sitting alongside. We have cafe forum and discussions and arguments and all sorts of stuff, and it's been hugely important to think about formal and informal relationships there. That buy-in has been tough to get buy-in, particularly around our context, which was there are teaching, research, and other. And it was like, how are you making it mainstream? How are you making it part of what a great university does? Actually, empowering staff has been harder than you think, because a lot of the forms and setup mean double signing, and it's got to go up to somebody, and it's got to go here. And when you just say, do it, and they go, yeah, but if I do it when I get fired, and you go, no, just do it. Oh, yeah, maybe. We better change that policy. So that's been actually quite hard to strip out some of the noise and nonsense in the system. We're still struggling, I think, a little bit with making timely decisions because someone thinks, okay, fine, I've got license to do what I like. Actually, no. You have license to do what you like within the context of delivering the university strategy and consulting with colleagues and keeping it legal and ethical. So there is a sort of sense of training around that. We had, again, a kind of sense that our reward strategy was not necessarily rewarding the right kind of behaviours. So we've had to reposition our academic promotions and some of our other promotions criteria to make sure that they are aligned with what we're saying we value, because they were historic. And actually where we are is really creating a new culture, that mindset, that culture, and we're establishing a brand new whole framework, a whole philosophy around developing an entrepreneurial international university. The kinds of things we did, and it'll be on the slide, I won't go through it, but this is our kind of checklist. We had to have and understand what the burning platform was. There is no plan B. If you don't kind of be strategically agile with a point of difference, you will fail. And we're seeing institutions in the UK struggle. There was a real sense that we wanted you to be led first with yourself. Self-leadership is where it starts. And we're working, it's tough and it's hard at the moment on the last bit around making sure all our planning processes and all our stuff inside the organisation delivers on the mission. Okay, I wanted just to quickly mention a couple of examples where this internationalisation, entrepreneurship, both and agenda, not either or, so it's not one versus another, it's both and, have really come together. And also to call out the British Council for their work in terms of help, and they haven't asked me to do this, me doing this, is the work that they've done to help us launch in a couple of spaces. One in particular, Sri Lanka, where that flux, that national business competition where the university's been so successful through its students, we took that across into Sri Lanka with the help of the British Council. The British Council that was led that, and it really helped take that. It's a bit like a Young Apprentice in the UK. It's a bit like a Dragon's Den approach, actually encouraging Sri Lankan students alongside other students, international students, to work together in multinational teams to become entrepreneurial and more entrepreneurial. And that relationship with the British Council through that then led us to become the institution of choice for the National School of Business Management. The Sri Lankan government were looking for a global partner to take their kind of global ideas around entrepreneurship, and because of our work in this space, they chose Plymouth, and it was very much facilitated by the work of the British Council, who helped not Plymouth, but helped Sri Lanka choose the right partner for them and brought Plymouth then to the table and helped us broker our relationship there. And I was out in Sri Lanka early in this year as we did the first part of our new green campus in Sri Lanka, and that's a government initiative around that national school, focused in very much on social entrepreneurship, social enterprise, and the whole entrepreneurial international culture that they are absolutely ready for. And it was a privilege, a genuine privilege to be involved. We're doing some work with DFID, which is a government department that looks at international development and taking entrepreneurial education, entrepreneurship education out into Africa in terms of both capacity and capability building. A huge amount of work. If you want to talk more about that, Professor David Wheeler, our Pro-Vice-Chancellor and Dean of Business School, is here and be with us at the conference, so he can talk you through some of that. And I wanted particularly to call out the work we're doing in Nigeria with UWIN, which was when the new president in Nigeria took over, President Jonathan. He saw the escalating kind of unemployment over there as being one of the biggest challenges to him. And 1 in 2 Nigerians under 35 years of age are out of work. There was crime. There was a whole range of other social challenges that he had. And he really committed to saying that in terms of his annual address, the commitment really was to take forward business planning and entrepreneurial education. And again, they looked out to who would they work with, and they work with Plymouth. And some of the statistics around DFID's engagement with Plymouth in Nigeria are quite phenomenal. There was a real understanding from the president that the economic growth of the country, the social inclusion agenda of the country, was materially influenced by entrepreneurial activity and taking an international perspective by working with organisations outside. So now, in terms of the kind of activity, just look at the number of interventions and the level of activity that Plymouth University has been delivering with the Nigerian government, backed by DFID. So the numbers are phenomenal, and we're now moving along to the next level with Nigeria to pick up and think about the UWIN competition and the UWIN space for women only, and to focus on repeating that for women. And again, 60,000 business constructs and concepts already focused on what we're doing there. So again, you're seeing that international entrepreneurship activity in that lens really taking force, I think. The president talked about, and the individuals included, just you know, there's this sense of incredible transformational power of these spaces, that they are enabling talent to really express itself and to take forward and build societies. It's phenomenal. So very proud of the work we're doing there. So to finish then, entrepreneurship versus, you'll see the little kind of seed change there to the word and. Entrepreneurship and internationalization, that's where it's at. Very much about the mindset, very much about the culture, absolutely reinforcing one upon the other. And we have seen enormous value reputationally, strategically, financially, through our student experience and elsewhere from stepping into this space boldly, with courage, and struggling through some of the difficult things. And I've put no option. I think for us as an institution, I think for many institutions, there's no plan B. There is the plan B is just don't do anything and see a withering on the vine. And we're seeing that now actively with some institutions, or really embrace those axes which are true to who you are and what you're about. I'll call out then, finally, an invitation to join Plymouth and us and our activities in 8 years' time. Mayflower 400 is a phenomenally important, I think, relationship with our American cousins, and a whole sense of us wanting to distinguish those 400 years of interdependence and mutuality. And we are going to be leading with our partners here in Massachusetts a range of activities around that. So we want to get to this one in 2020. So there was a real sense for us that there's something quite special about Plymouth and the City of Discovery, the pioneering spirit of those folk, and maybe we should just take a little bit of courage from them. So finish up then. Can universities prioritise both? Of course we can. Of course we can. Thank you very much.